So recently I was doing my favorite pastime, doom scrolling Facebook Marketplace. And I often complain that there's not really anything good that pops up in my area. Like, it's very rare that you get any sort of a deal or anything like that. But every once in a while, something interesting does come up. Well, I guess interesting is subjective. Does this look interesting to you? Well, it looked interesting enough to me. And for the price of free, I kind of couldn't say no. It was about an hour round trip, and the guy who I got it from was a super friendly guy, very awesome, and he actually gave me more stuff for free, which was super cool. But the topic of today's video is gonna stay at this. The thing I originally came for. Now, what actually caught me as soon as I saw the listing for this laptop is this little logo right here. But I was also quickly met with disappointment. 9000 IGP. It's basically just a glorified built-in graphics adapter. No fancy Radeon 9700 or 9600 whatever here. No, it's just a Radeon 9000. And yet, knowing this, I was still drawn to this laptop. And as I said, it worked out pretty well because I ended up getting some arguably more interesting stuff out of it. But the laptop itself is still kind of interesting. It's actually a desktop Pentium 4 laptop, if you can believe it. This thing has a desktop Pentium 4 inside of it, absolutely burning and melting everything in its path. Okay, it's actually a Northwood, not a press hot, so it's not that hot, but it's still pretty hot. Either way, these Pentium 4 laptops have always been an interesting curiosity to me because, as I said, they have a full Pentium 4 CPU stuck to the board, like a desktop Pentium 4 CPU. You could take this out and put this in any 478 board that supports a Northwood with hyperthreading, because that's what's in here, spoiler, and it'll work. We think of laptop CPUs today, and they're like these tiny little like efficient versions of like modern desktop CPUs, but again, this thing is literally rocking a CPU just like this inside of it. Kinda crazy. And if you know how hot the Pentium 4 gets, then it feels even crazier. But either way, by today's standards, a laptop like this with a Pentium 4 and a Radeon 9000 that literally says designed for Windows XP, not very useful, obviously. I mean, there are some modernization projects like Supermium and like Legacy Update and stuff that can kind of bring these things up, at least software-wise, a bit more to be kind of useful, where they can like browse the web at least, even if it's painfully slow. But in typical fashion of my channel, we want to see if you can game on this thing. That's right, free laptop does it game. Because that Radeon 9000 IGP is technically, as I understand it, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that is a desktop core Radeon 9000 graphics card. It just has the horrible, unfortunate circumstances of having to share memory, very slow memory, with the system. But under the right conditions, is it actually somewhat usable? I think it goes without saying that if we are going to test this thing out to see if it can truly game, we number one need to run old games, of course. We can't be running anything new, but we should also really set our expectations. Whatever native resolution this panel is, do not expect it to run at that. Going into this, we're gonna have to try and run games with reduced settings at screen resolutions that might trigger me because they're all fuzzy and stretched out. But if we can get things to happen, I would count that as a win. I mean, again, it was free. All I had to do was drive 30 minutes, meet a very nice person, and take home even more cool free stuff. So let me stop ranting in front of this dead laptop, because spoiler alert, the battery doesn't work. We're gonna plug it in, quickly go over it a little bit, the specs and whatnot, and the operating system that I chose to install on it, because it's not what you might think it is. And then we'll run some games and kind of just go over the results a little bit, and then determine if this was really something worth picking up or not. So why Windows 2000? Well, basically, it's because we have under a gig of RAM, and I get that I could maybe install like Windows XP, like even Service Pack 1 or just no Service Pack at all, but I kind of already have enough Windows XP machines, and I already have one Windows XP laptop. I'm like, let's spice it up. Let's put Windows 2000 on here. it will be less resource intensive, and it should be, at least in terms of like games and stuff, about the same in terms of compatibility with Windows XP, at least when we're talking about the scope of games that could actually run on this thing. So for specs, we have a Pentium 4 3 gigahertz Northwood with an 800 megahertz frontside bus and hyperthreading, as you can see right here. We also have a gigabyte of RAM, but 128 of that is dedicated to the Radeon 9000 IGP. Now you can actually change how much you allocate to the card in the BIOS. 128 megabytes probably a little too generous. Maybe 64 would be better, but it'll be fine, I think. We have plenty of RAM, at least if we're trying to run Windows 2000. It looks like the display's maximum resolution and native resolution is 1280 by 800, so for sure we won't be running anything at that because this little IGP is probably not going to be able to handle it. It is not so bad. It's a relatively standard resolution. I think if we downscale, it's not going to be too rough, but we'll see. It also came with a nice 80 gigabyte, 4200 RPM hard drive, not even 5400 RPM. That was actually another reason why I wanted to go with Windows 2000, just because I feel like it's going to be a little less intense on such a slow hard drive. This laptop also has a Wi-Fi card, believe it or not. This is probably one of the earliest laptops to have a Wi-Fi card. Now unfortunately, I tried and I just can't get it to work, and I just noticed that's a thing with like cheap or older Wi-Fi cards. They just don't connect to my Wi-Fi for some reason. Oh, actually one more thing I wanted to talk about was like heat and noise. So there is like an intake vent here, and then over here on the back on that side, you can't see it, but there's an exhaust vent that pushes the air out. So it sucks it in here and pushes it out there. When I first got the laptop, it was insanely loud, and I took the whole, well, not the whole thing, but I took most of it apart, and I redid the thermal compound on the CPU, and I also lubricated both fans because they were making some pretty nasty noises. And it's not as bad now. Probably can't even really hear it through the video, but it's still a little bit noisy. But as you would expect for a Pentium 4, the fans are constantly spinning. There's no point where the fans aren't spinning. You kind of have to get used to the ambient noise of the fan spinning, as you would kind of with a desktop or something. So this is by no means a quiet laptop, but it's not too loud either. I think if you're like gaming and you're using the built-in speakers on the laptop, which by the way sound actually pretty good, it's not really going to be that much of a problem in terms of noise. Starting things off with Serious Sam, we're getting some relatively reasonable numbers here, especially for the resolution that we're playing at. Unfortunately though, the minimum is pretty ugly, just 19 FPS. Now all the settings were maxed, so there is that. Maybe if you turn down the settings a bit, your minimum won't be so harsh. But nonetheless, it was not too often that you would see such low numbers, so definitely playable, but not a full 60 FPS. Unreal Tournament 99 was next, and we saw pretty okay numbers across the board. The average was definitely very good, but you would really feel the dip in frames during combat and stuff. And personally, I find that is kind of off-putting. It really kind of distracts from the action. So for me, I would say while this is playable for sure, it's definitely not the greatest experience, especially when you consider that you have to crank it down to 800 by 600 to hit these numbers. I absolutely love RCCars. It's like this obscure game that I really remember playing a lot as a kid. And so I like to try it on all sorts of different hardware, because as you're seeing here, it actually doesn't take too much to run this DX 8.1 title. So at 800 by 600, these are some pretty decent results. Our minimum too, all things considered, is really good. And I didn't really notice that many dips, except for when you're driving in the sand and it kind of kicks up dust. Then you start to see the dips kind of below 30, but otherwise, it was actually a really good experience. Now I'm kicking things up a little bit, and we're testing the Simpsons Hit Run at 800 by 600. Now, the average seems okay, but then you see the min, and that's really not good. And the sad reality is that this game spends most of its time hovering just under 30 FPS, so I would say that this one's borderline unplayable. And the ultimate test is UT 2003, running at 800 by 600 with custom settings that I'm probably going to show here. If not, I forgot, sorry. But it's mainly medium-low settings. So I'm playing on DM Plunge, and the average, once again, seems really good, but the min is brutal, 12 FPS. And unfortunately, the sad reality is that most of the time, you're going to be under 30 FPS in this game, with the exception of the smaller, really kind of like one-on-one type maps that are really cramped. So did we win? Can it game?
I would say yes, it can game, but you have to have very, very conservative expectations. The RC300 chip is actually a pretty decent chip. It surprised me with how well it could run stuff, but I could also tell that it was really struggling because it had to share lowly 333 megahertz memory with the system. This not only cripples the memory bus, but it's just also very slow memory overall. I don't really think it's worth it to go out of your way to pick up one of these laptops or spend a ton of money on it, at least if it has the Radeon 9000 IGP. But if you get one for free, or if it's like really close by and the seller's willing to take like $10, I think it's actually not half bad. Again, we were getting relatively decent performance, you just have to put up with some unstable frame rate. That's the trade-off. And of course, as well, having to turn down the graphical settings and the resolution. But I think if you were in a pinch, or even if you just wanted to do something like on a really tight budget, or maybe you're not even that like serious or hardcore of a retro gamer, this might be perfectly fine for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya.